The candlelight quivered, as if afraid to touch the walls. Shadows shifted and stretched along the cold stones, distorting into grotesque shapes that danced in silence. Outside, the winter wind howled against the fortress, battering the shutters with frozen fists. Inside, in the heart of the keep, the air was warmer, but no less deadly. The chamber smelled of iron, not the rust of weapons, nor the tang of unpolished armor, but the metallic, suffocating scent of fresh blood. It clung to the air, heavy and thick, coating the back of the throat with each breath. In the center of the room stood a tableau, wide, carved from black marble veined with white. Steam rose from its surface, though it was not water that warmed it. The liquid shimmered darkly in the candlelight, catching the golden flicker in shades of deep crimson and near black. She stood beside it, pale as frost in the moonlight. Her hair, the color of raven's wings, cascaded over a gown of silk so fine it seemed spun from mist. She was young, no more than 20 winters. Her beauty was undeniable, almost otherworldly. But her eyes betrayed something else. Not serenity, not joy, something colder, hungrier. A servant knelt before her, trembling. In her hands, she held a silver pitcher. The girl's knuckles whitened as she gripped it, her gaze fixed on the floor, refusing to meet the princess's stare. "Pour it," the princess whispered. The voice was soft, yet it carried through the chamber like a blade drawn in silence. The servant obeyed, tipping the pitcher over the marble basin. A thick stream of red cascaded into the bath, mingling with what was already there. It hissed faintly as it met the heat. The girl's breathing quickened. The pitcher felt heavier in her hands now. The warmth of the liquid seeped through the metal, almost burning her skin. She had served in this chamber before. She knew what was in that bath, and she prayed she would not see the sauce lying discarded in the corner. But she did. There, against the wall, wrapped in linen once white, but now soaked to a deep, unnatural shade, was the shape of a body. Small, barely more than a child. The princess moved closer to the tub. She untied the sash at her waist and let her gown fall in a slow, deliberate motion. Her skin caught the candlelight like polished ivory. For a heartbeat, she closed her eyes and inhaled deeply, as if savoring the scent rising from the basin. Then, she stepped in. The crimson water lapped at her ankles, swirling in lazy spirals around her pale skin. She lowered herself further, her movements languid, almost ritualistic. When the liquid reached her collarbone, she leaned back, allowing her hair to float around her like a dark halo. Her eyes opened, and for a moment, the candlelight caught them just right, making them appear like twin shards of ice. The servant shivered. She dared not move, dared not breathe too loudly. The princess's lips curved into the faintest of smiles. "They say," she murmured, speaking more to herself than to anyone else, "that beauty fades, that time will take what is mine. But time does not rule me." Her hands skimmed the surface, leaving ripples that distorted the reflection of her face. "No, I will rule it." Outside, somewhere deep in the forest beyond the castle walls, a wolf howled. Its cry was swallowed by the wind, but inside the crimson chamber, the only sound was the soft, wet lap of the blood against marble, and the quiet sigh of a woman who believed she had found the key to immortality. The servant's knees ached from kneeling, but she remained silent as the stone beneath her. She knew the rumors, whispers among the kitchen staff, the stable hands, the laundresses, tales of missing girls from nearby villages, of travelers who vanished after dark, of screams heard from the tower when the snow was heavy enough to muffle sound. And she knew something else, that the princess had not always been like this, that once she had been bright and warm, beloved even by those who envied her beauty. But something had changed, something had rotted inside her heart. The princess leaned her head back, closing her eyes once more. For her, this was not murder, it was preservation. Her breathing slowed. She drifted into something between waking and dream. In her mind, she saw herself as she wished to be remembered, flawless, untouchable, eternal. The world around her could wither, kingdoms could fall, and yet she would remain forever young. A gust of wind rattled the shutters, a candle guttered and went out. Shadows lengthened along the walls, stretching their fingers toward the bath, as if they, too, sought to touch her skin. Somewhere below, in the great hall, a door slammed. Footsteps echoed against stone. The princess did not stir, but the servant's head snapped toward the sound. She knew that voice, the sharp, authoritative bark of the captain of the guard. He was calling for the chamber to be opened. Her pulse hammered in her ears. The pitcher slipped in her hands, striking the floor with a dull, ringing clang. The crimson surface rippled violently. The princess's eyes flew open. For the first time that night, she frowned. The sound of boots on stairs grew louder. The servant's breath came fast now, and though the air was warm, a chill spread through her bones. The door shuddered under a heavy blow. Once, twice, a third time. The princess rose from the bath in a slow, almost regal motion. Crimson rivulets traced the lines of her body, dripping onto the cold stone floor. She took a step toward the door. Then another. Her bare feet left dark prints in her wake. The captain's voice thundered from the other side. "Open this door." The princess glanced over her shoulder at the servant. The smile had returned to her lips, though now it held something sharper. "Do not answer," she said. The servant's gaze darted between the door and the woman before her. The pounding grew louder. And somewhere, deep in the servant's chest, a truth settled like a stone at the bottom of a well. Whatever happened next, there would be no going back. Before she became the whispered nightmare in every peasant household, the princess was simply a daughter of power born into a world where beauty was both currency and weapon. Her name was Erzsébet, born in 1560, in the wild and war-torn lands of Hungary. She was the daughter of two noble bloodlines, so intertwined that they might as well have been one. Her family's castles dotted the hills like stone sentinels, their banners fluttering red and black against skies that were rarely still. These were not gentle times. The kingdom was a fractured frontier, caught between the teeth of two empires. To the west, the Habsburg monarchy, cold, calculating, and ever hungry for land. To the east, the Ottoman Empire, its shadow creeping across Europe like a tide of fire and steel. Between them lay a patchwork of lords and barons, each with their own alliances, feuds, and armies, shifting loyalties as easily as seasons changed. In such a place, nobility was not just a title, it was a survival strategy, and Erzsébet's family were masters of survival. From her earliest days, she was surrounded by the trappings of power: feasts beneath vaulted ceilings, tutors speaking Latin and Greek, servants bowing so low their foreheads nearly touched the floor. She learned to ride a horse before she could write her name, to strike a man with a blade before she had her first dance. But the most important lesson came not from tutors or knights, it came from her mother, Beauty. Her mother told her one winter evening, as snow piled against the shutters is the first gift the world notices, and the first it seeks to destroy. You must guard it as you would guard your life. The words lodged in Erzsébet's mind like a shard of ice. As she grew, the truth of them became painfully clear. Even in her teenage years, men twice her age sought her hand, not for her laughter or mind, but for the promise of her face, its symmetry, its pale perfection, the way it seemed untouched by the dust and hardship of peasant life. It was said her beauty could silence a room, but beauty is not a shield, it is bait. When she was 15, she was betrothed to Ferenc Nadasdy, a soldier and nobleman whose loyalty lay with the Habsburg crown. Their marriage was not born of love. It was a contract inked in political necessity. Ferenc was rarely home, spending most of his life on the battlefield, earning the grim nickname the Black Knight of Hungary for the cruelty he showed to Ottoman prisoners. While he waged war, Erzsébet learned the art of rule, managing estates, overseeing servants, and enforcing the laws of her lands. It was here that her reputation began to shift. She was not a woman to be trifled with. Disobedience among servants was met with swift punishments, sometimes a public beating, sometimes something quieter and far more terrifying. Villagers whispered about her temper, about the way she could go from calm to furious in the space of a breath. Still, nothing in those early years hinted at the horrors to come. The seeds had been planted, yes, but the soil was not yet soaked with blood. The first shadow fell when Ferenc died. It was 1604. Erzsébet was 44 years old. For nearly 3 decades, her husband's presence, distant though it often was, had been a shield of sorts. His name carried weight, and with it came a certain restraint from those who might wish her harm. But death is a great equalizer, and when the Black Knight was buried, the vultures began to circle. Her lands were vast, her wealth considerable, but in the eyes of many men at court, she was now vulnerable. A widow without a husband's protection was fair game, and the younger she looked, the more they would seek to possess her. It was around this time that the first true whispers began. Servants spoke of new rituals in the high tower, of girls from nearby villages being brought to the castle to serve and never being seen again, of strange stains in the laundry, of screams carried on the wind at night. Some claimed it began with an accidental young maid who angered Erzsébet while combing her hair, tugging too hard at a knot. The princess had struck her across the face so violently that the girl's nose bled. A drop of that blood, they said, fell on Erzsébet's skin, and in the flickering candlelight she believed she saw it her flesh appearing somehow smoother, younger, in that tiny, crimson-marked place. Whether that moment was real or imagined, no one could say, but it was the spark, and sparks, in the wrong hands, become infernous. In the years that followed, the high tower of Countess Castle would become a place of dread. The villagers avoided the road leading to its gates after dark. Mothers kept their daughters close, warning them never to look a noblewoman in the eye. But still, the disappearances continued, and within those cold stone walls, Erzsébet, once the jewel of the Hungarian nobility, would begin her descent into the legend that made her immortal, though not in the way she intended. The road to Countess wound like a serpent through the hills, narrow and lined with skeletal trees that seemed to claw at the sky. In winter, the snow lay so thick it swallowed sound, muffling the cries of wolves and the hooves of passing horses. Yet no villager lingered there after sunset. They said the tower never slept. Darvulia was one of the first to cross its gates willingly. She was not a peasant girl, but a woman in her 40s, sharp-eyed and quiet, a distant relative of Erzsébet. Mother, rumor claimed she had knowledge of herbs both, those that healed and those that killed, and a way of speaking that could still a trembling heart or twist it into fear. Anna became the lady's confidant, the shadow at her side, and it was after Anna arrived that the lessons for the young servant girls grew darker. One such girl was Kata, no more than 14. She came from a nearby village, her family too poor to refuse the offer of work at the castle. In her first days, she marveled at the stone halls and tapestries, the great hearths that seemed to roar day and night. But soon she learned the rules: never speak unless spoken to, never meet the mistress's gaze for too long, and never under any circumstance enter the high tower without permission. The first time she broke that last rule, it was not by choice. A bitter wind had swept through the corridors one January night, rattling shutters and snuffing candles. Cotta was sent to fetch a bundle of linens from the upper floors. The stairs to the high tower were not well lit. Their stone steps narrowed as they rose, curling like the spine of some ancient beast. At the top was a heavy wooden door, iron and marked with strange black stains along the bottom. She knocked. No answer. The door was ajar. Inside, the air was thick with the coppery temps of blood. At first, she thought it was from the slaughtering of an animal. It was a smell she knew from the winter coals. But when her eyes adjusted to the gloom, she saw the truth. A girl lay on the floor, her body crumpled like a discarded rag doll. Her skin was pale as wax, her hair matted and dark with what had spilled from the wound in her neck, and over her stood the mistress, sleeves rolled to the elbow, her white shift spattered red. Anna Darvulia was there too, holding a small silver basin that steamed faintly in the cold air. Neither woman spoke. Erzsébet turned her head, slow as a predator interrupted mid-feast. Her eyes locked on Cotta's, and in them was no shame, only irritation, as if the girl had stumbled into a private conversation. Closed the door, the mistress said. Cotta's hands trembled so badly she could barely obey. She fled down the stairs, linens forgotten, heart pounding so hard she thought it might burst. That night, she lay in her narrow bed in the servants' quarters, listening. She heard the creak of footsteps in the corridor above, the splash of water, or was it something thicker, and then a faint metallic clink. It went on for hours. By dawn, the high tower was silent again. The next morning, the mistress's skin seemed to glow, as if she had been walking in warm sunlight, instead of pacing her cold stone halls. She smiled at the gathered servants, her teeth very white. "Some of you," she said softly, "will serve me better than others." The weeks that followed blurred into a cycle of work, fear, and disappearances. One by one, girls Cotta had scrubbed floors with, shared bread with, whispered to in the dark, they were gone. Always without warning, always without farewell. The official story was that they had been sent home, or to another of the mistress's estates, but no one in the village ever saw them again, and the black stains at the base of the high tower door grew darker. For years, historians would debate whether Erzsébet's obsession with youth was born of superstition, vanity, or madness. Some claimed she believed blood fresh and warm was a fountain of life, rich with the vitality of the young. Others argued it was simply cruelty without cause, masked by ritual. But for the girls in Countess, there was no debate. The truth was in the screams that rattled the shutters at night, and in the way their mistress's cheeks seemed always flushed, as though she had just returned from some secret forbidden feast. And somewhere in the high tower, a silver basin waited, polished to a mirror's shine. In the heart of Pressburg, the winter markets bustled. Merchants shouted over one another, selling Hungarian wool, Polish amber, Moravian wine. The smoke of roasting chestnuts curled into the air, and the bells of distant churches marked the passing hours. Yet beneath the noise and color, certain names passed from mouth to mouth in lowered voices, as if speaking them too loudly might invite misfortune. The name of Countess Erzsébet Báthory was one of them. Not every rumor found an eager ear. The peasants had long been known to invent dark tales about their lords, born from envy, resentment, or simple fear. But these whispers were different. They came not only from shepherds and farmers, but also from lesser nobles, travelers, even clergymen who had crossed her lands. Their stories converged in certain details: girls taken into service at the castle and never seen again, nights when screams carried across the snowfields, the countess's skin pale but strangely luminous, as if it held its own inner light. By the year 1609, the rumors had drifted far enough to find ears that mattered. Bishop Benedict Kisti, a man not easily swayed by superstition, listened carefully. He believed in sin, yes, and in the devil's temptations, but he also believed in proof. When he received multiple reports claiming the countess was engaged in unnatural practices, he did not dismiss them outright. Instead, he sent Father Matthew, a trusted priest, to investigate quietly. When the priest returned, his face was drawn and pale. He spoke of hidden rooms in the upper tower, barred to all but a few of the countess's women, and of villagers who swore their daughters had been taken for service but never returned. He mentioned a strange smell and rot that drifted from the castle on still winter nights. Kisti wrote a cautious letter to Palatine György Thurzo, the king's highest representative in Hungary. If the claims were false, they must be silenced to preserve the realm's dignity. But if they were true, the matter touched not only the law of man, but the law of God. Erzsébet's position made the matter delicate. She was no mere wealthy widow. She was kin to kings. Her cousin Gábor Bathory ruled Transylvania. Her late husband had been a celebrated war hero, and her estates were vast and strategically important. If she were convicted of crimes against the crown, her lands could be seized, and there were many among the male-dominated nobility who would gladly divide her inheritance among themselves. For years, the Bathory name had been both shield and weapon for her, but now it seemed to draw a dangerous level of attention. Inside the castle, the atmosphere shifted. Anna Darvulia's influence deepened the cruelty. Where once Erzsébet's violence came in sudden fits of anger, now it became methodical, even ritualistic. Darvulia taught her to drain the blood with precision, to collect it in vessels that would keep it warm longer. She spoke of life essence, of how the young carried a fire in their veins that the old could steal if they dared enough. Erzsébet listened. She began to speak less of beauty as a vanity, and more as a form of power, something that could be taken, worn, and made to last. It was no longer enough to strike or starve her servants. Now the tower became a place of instruments, knives, hooks, iron pokers heated until they glowed. Some nights the basin was not enough, and the flagstones themselves ran dark. Yet, in public, Erzsébet maintained her composure. She still played the perfect hostess when lesser nobles visited. She smiled, she poured wine. She spoke of court gossip as if nothing beyond the ordinary occupied her thoughts. But in Pressburg, Palatine Thurzo began to weigh his options. To move too quickly risked angering her powerful relatives. To delay risked the wrath of both church and people. He chose to proceed quietly, sending spies into the surrounding villages, gathering the names of every girl who had entered service. At Countess in the past decade, the lists grew long, too long. Many names were crossed out with a single word beside them, missing. Thurzo began to suspect that the truth was worse than the rumors suggested. Inside the castle, Erzsébet felt the change in the air. She began sending letters to her relatives, asking for loyalty and silence. She ordered the gates reinforced and reminded her servants brutally that betrayal would mean death. And high in the tower, the basin waited, its surface polished, to a mirror, ready to reflect her face radiant, almost youthful, the reward of another bath in warm crimson. The snow fell hard on the evening of December 29th, 1610, coating the roads to Countess Castle in a thick, muffled silence. From the tower windows, the world looked white and harmless, but Erzsébet Báthory felt the unease tightening in her chest. She had been restless for weeks. Whispers had grown louder in the surrounding villages, and the priests who once feared her now spoke her name in sermons. She knew the world beyond her walls was stirring. Still, she told herself, she was untouchable. She was Bathory blood. No one would dare. The night's work began as it always did. In the upper chamber, the torches burned low, throwing shadows that seemed to breathe on the walls. A young girl, trembling, stood by the basin. Erzsébet's hands, pale and slender, rested on the girl's shoulders, her voice calm as she murmured instructions to Anna Darvulia and the two other women who served as her accomplices. The Countess had chosen this girl carefully, skin, eyes bright with youth. She imagined how the warmth of her blood would feel on her own face, how it would wash away the faintest lines of age that dared to appear. But downstairs, the world had shifted. The crunch of boots on snow broke the night's stillness. First a few, then many. Horses stamped in the cold, their breaths steaming in the torchlight. At the head of the force rode Palatine Gheorghe Thurzo, his black cloak whipping in the wind, his men armed and grim. He had waited for the perfect moment, gathering enough witnesses, enough proof, and most importantly the king's approval. Tonight, he would end the reign of the Blood Countess. The outer gates of the castle were old, but strong. Thurzo's men did not waste time with subtlety. The first blow of the battering ram shook the stones, echoing through the corridors. In the upper tower, Erzsébet froze. Darvulia's eyes went sharp and narrow. "They're here," she hissed. For one heartbeat, panic swept the Countess's face. But then she smoothed it away and stood tall, the embodiment of noble defiance. The second blow cracked the wood. The third sent the gates crashing inward. Soldiers surged through, their boots hammering the courtyard stones. The servants scattered like startled birds, some screaming, others throwing themselves at the mercy of the invaders. Thurzo moved with purpose, ignoring the chaos around him, heading straight for the tower. Up the spiral stairs they came, the clang of steel against stone a steady drumbeat of inevitability. When they burst into the chamber, the scene was frozen in time. The girl stood wide-eyed by the basin, her lips forming a soundless plea. Erzsébet, in her dark gown, turned toward them slowly, her expression unreadable. The basin's contents thick, red, and unmistakable reflected the torchlight, like a dark jewel Thurzo took in the sight, his jaw tightening. "Countess," he said, his voice flat, "by order of the king, you are under arrest." She did not answer. Her eyes slid over the soldiers, over Thurzo himself, and finally down to the girl. Something like pity, no, something like disappointment passed across her face. "Do you know what power is, Palatine?" she asked, her tone low but clear. "It is the ability to take what you want, and no one can stop you." "Not tonight," Thurzo replied. He gestured to his men. The soldiers moved in. Darvulia lunged forward, a dagger flashing, but a sword caught her arm and sent her sprawling. The girl was pulled away, sobbing. Erzsébet did not struggle as they bound her hands. She only held Thurzo's gaze, her lips curling into the faintest, most unnerving smile. The search began immediately. Room by room the soldiers uncovered the evidence. Locked chests filled with blood-stained garments, a hidden chamber with shackles fixed to the walls, iron tools still warm from the fire. In one dark corner, they found what they had dreaded, some too far gone to identify, others recent enough to make the men recoil. By dawn, the castle stood hollow and still. Erzsébet was confined to a room under heavy guard, her accomplices taken to face trial. Outside, the villagers gathered, craning for a glimpse of the woman whose name had haunted their nights for years. Some cursed her, others simply stared, trying to reconcile the pale, composed figure with the horrors they had been told. Palatine Thurzo knew the trial would be dangerous. Erzsébet's family still wielded influence, and the king himself feared the scandal of a public execution for a woman of her rank. But Thurzo also knew that what he had seen in that tower would never leave him. The blood, the instruments, The silence, it was more than crime. It was a darkness that had eaten away her soul until nothing human remained. The gates of Countess had fallen. The legend of the Blood Countess was about to be written, not in whispers, but in ink that would last for centuries. The winter light was pale, the morning Erzsébet Báthory awoke in her final prison. Her cell was not the damp dungeon of folklore, but a small walled chamber inside her own castle. The windows were bricked shut. The door was sealed, save for a small slit through which food was passed. The stone walls seemed to close in on her, absorbing the last traces of warmth. It was the ultimate irony. The woman who had commanded halls filled with torches, music, and terrified servants now had only silence for company. She did not scream, at least, not where anyone could hear. In the first days, she paced the narrow space like a caged wolf, muttering to herself, rehearsing the same arguments she had given to Thurzo, that she was a noblewoman above reproach, that the girls were liars, that enemies had conspired to destroy her. But as the days became weeks, and the weeks became months, even her own voice began to sound strange to her. The air grew heavy. The cold seeped into her bones. Outside the sealed door, the seasons shifted. The snow melted into spring mud. The orchards bloomed and withered, and still she remained. The villagers who had once gathered outside the gates to curse her name now turned their attention to the living bad. The girls who had vanished were remembered only by their families, their names fading into the soil along with their bodies. Yet, within her stone tomb, Erzsébet refused to let go of the one thing that had driven her life, the fear of decay. She imagined her skin wrinkling in the dark, her beauty rotting away unseen. In those endless hours, she replayed the rituals in her mind, how the blood had felt, warm and slick against her face, how it seemed to bring a flush to her cheeks. She clung to the memory as if it could still work its magic. But no amount of remembering could stop time. On the night of August 20th, 1614, the guards found her lying on the floor near the bed. She was cold, her eyes open but empty, staring at the wall that had been her only horizon for 4 years. No one wept. The priest gave her last rites, not for her sake, but for the sake of her powerful family's name. She was buried in secret, her grave unmarked, as if the earth itself wished to erase her. But the earth cannot erase everything. The legend took root almost immediately. In the taverns, men told stories of the Countess who bathed in virgin's blood. In the churches, priests warned young women to guard themselves against the corrupt and powerful. Over the centuries, the details shifted. Sometimes she was a demon, sometimes a victim of political conspiracy, but the image of her standing in a crimson-stained bath endured. Modern scholars argue over the truth. Some say she was guilty of every horror whispered about her. Others believe she was framed by men who coveted her lands and feared a woman's power. Archaeological digs at Countess have uncovered bones in shallow graves, some showing signs of violence, others too fragmented to tell their story. The documents from her trial remain records of testimony, accounts of the search, but they cannot speak the tone in which the words were said, nor the pressure under which they were given. And perhaps that is the final cruelty of history. It preserves the bones but not the breath. We return now to that opening night, the flicker of torchlight on red water, the stillness that seemed to hold its breath before the door burst open. In that moment, Erzsébet Báthory believed she could defy time, that beauty was worth any cost, that fear was the truest form of power. But time did what blood could not. It hollowed her, starved her, erased her beauty, until only the story remained. What lesson lives in her shadow depends on who tells it. Some will see her as proof of the darkness that can grow when power is unchecked. Others will see her as a warning that the fear of losing what we love, youth, beauty, control, can lead us into unspeakable acts. And some, perhaps, will see her as both a woman and a monster, shaped as much by the world she ruled as by the hunger that consumed her. The torches have long since gone out in Countess Castle. The stone halls are empty, their silence broken only by the wind that slips through the cracks. But in that silence, if you listen closely, you might still hear the faint echo of water lapping against stone, and wonder whether it was water at all.